It's time to talk about the important issues for the natural state. And there's only one place to turn for that. Opportunity Arkansas's Nick Horton. You can find Nick's work at opportunityarkansas.org.
And welcome back. It is the Wednesday edition of First News, 12th of November. Just about 19 minutes in front of 7 o'clock, and that does mean it's time for Nick Horton, the founder and CEO of Opportunity Arkansas, to join us. And Nick, good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Good morning. It's a little chilly out there, Toby. I wasn't quite expecting this week.
Yeah, I mean, boy, Monday morning was a whopper coming out the door. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah,
so.
it happens fast.
It's
like 90 degrees one day, and then a couple days later, all of a sudden, I'm looking for my coat. So
here's the beauty, though. By Friday, we're back up like 79, 80. So you're going to be in good shape by the end of the week.
It's that time of year in Arkansas where you have to walk outside and then go back inside to get dressed. You got to walk outside to figure out what clothes you need to wear, and then you got to go back in the house.
I employ a duffel bag, and so I just put extra things in. And so I've got coats,
I've
got I got the sleeveless shirts, I got whatever it might be for the weather that you might be needed.
Your neighbors probably appreciate that more than you walking outside without clothes on. So
I did get booed when I was out there grabbing the garbage can in just my bathrobe the other day. So, but whatever. So, Nick, Opportunity Arkansas has issued out another round of awards, and one of them was called the Pioneer Award. Went to Representative Kenan Underwood, and so can you explain what the Pioneer Award is compared to like the Defender Award that Opportunity Arkansas gives out as well?
Yeah, I love this question because we love giving out awards at Opportunity Arkansas. I mean, we're big believers in giving honor where honor is due, and obviously, as your listeners probably know, we just had our 3-year anniversary. We've been a part of literally dozens of policy wins over the last 3 years, and we're very proud of that and excited by that. But we are very well aware that none of that would have happened without our partners in the legislature, in the executive branch, and state agencies, and frankly, even folks out there in your audience like education freedom moms and folks who are benefiting from these policies that are then showing up at the state capitol and testifying in support of them and defense of them, that are actually doing a lot of the grunt work. So we have really good ideas, but as I tell people all the time, I can't run legislation at the state capitol. Unfortunately, I tried and they wouldn't let me. They sent me home.
We saw you get thrown out of the chamber.
Well,
there.
that's true. That did happen.
See that.
Yeah, that did actually happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have several different awards. The Pioneer Award, as you mentioned, so that's an award, Opportunity Pioneer, that we give to folks that are really leading the charge up the hill towards conservative policy reform. So in the case of Representative Kenan Underwood, who you mentioned, he was the lead sponsor of eliminating entirely our state grocery tax. That was an issue that he worked on even 2 sessions ago and continued to till the ground on that and pull us towards conservative reform. He also had some really great legislation that made some positive changes to our cash welfare program that we believe are going to reduce government dependency, and a whole host of issues, ballot initiative reform. I mean, the list really goes on and on. He did so much this last session to advance the conservative cause. So he got the Pioneer Award. We've also given out recently several Opportunity Defender Awards.
Yep.
And so those are awards for folks who vote the right way based on our issues and our priorities of reducing government dependency, reducing the tax burden on folks, advancing education freedom, all of our legislative priorities. If they align with our priorities more than 90%, they get an Opportunity Defender Award. So those are kind of 2 of the different types of awards that we give out.
Yeah, in fact, I got to see you issue out Representative Britt McKenzie's Defender Award last week. He had 102%. Is it 102%? Is that right on the scorecard?
102%. And just so folks are aware, because, some people have said, I mean, I know I was homeschooled, Toby, for at least half my career, but I can do math. Here's how you get 102%. You vote the right way consistently. But then one change we made to our scorecard methodology this year is we actually said, if you are also sponsoring those really good bills, like we wouldn't have good bills to score on our scorecard if it wasn't for people like Representative Britt McKenzie, Representative David Ray, Representative Kenan Underwood, who are carrying these conservative bills. And so they got some bonus points for carrying good bills. And then frankly, to be honest, the people who carried the really bad bills, they lost a point. They got a negative point for putting bad bills forward.
Now, one thing that I was talking about that you and I were going to get into was something that was just brought to my attention by you recently here in terms of the educational freedom accounts. Jay, will you play us some breaking news?
This is breaking news on News Radio 1029 KARN.
Not seeing this information anywhere at this point until Nick told me. And so, Nick, it's a bill that was passed in the last session that Opportunity Arkansas fought against. And it was about how education freedom monies can be spent by families accessing the program. And it sounds like the framework for this has now just been released by the Education Department, the State Education Department. And so what can you tell us about what has happened with education freedom money and some new rules and regulations?
Yeah, a lot to unpack here. So your listeners probably remember back during session, and we scored this on our Opportunity Scorecard if folks want to go see it at our website and see how their legislators voted. Representative Brett McKenzie, who we were just talking about, voted against this bill. A lot of legislators stood up and voted against this. It was a step backwards in terms of education freedom. It was SB 625, and basically the final version of the bill was not nearly as horrible as the initial version of the bill. We engaged very heavily and were able to amend the bill and make it a lot less damaging for education freedom families. But basically what the bill said was, yeah, we're going to have universal education freedom, and we're going to let families get this funding and let them use it for, private school, homeschool, micro school, however they want to educate their kids. But we're going to put some new restrictions and regulations and strings on how they can use that money. One of the big pieces of that ended up in the final legislation was a cap on extracurricular and transportation costs of 25%. So the EFA amount is roughly $7,000, and the state's saying, the legislature and the governor signed the bill to say, well, 25% of that, no more than 25% of that can go towards extracurricular or transportation. What happens often, Toby, which is really frustrating, and I think folks just need to be aware of this, and maybe it's something I need to be talking about more, is this legislation passes, the legislature goes home, and then the state agencies, they get to make the rules. Literally, they get to write the rules to implement these bills and these laws. And a lot of times what happens, and I think what we're about to see start to play out here, unless something changes and people speak up, is that the state agencies exceed their authority. They go well above and beyond the intent of the legislation and the legislature, and they try to go even further than not only what they're allowed to do under state law and under our framework of government, but frankly beyond what's good for families. So this rule that we've been waiting on for almost 6 months now, since legislative session, more than 6 months, they published it on Thursday of last week. It's now going to go before the State Board of Education, and there's a lot of things. I've got about 5 pages worth of notes of problems of anti-family, anti-education freedom pieces of this. But there's 2 really big pieces that I think people need to be aware of that are a big step backwards. Frankly, I think exceed the intent of the legislature and are not family friendly towards families that are in the education freedom program. The biggest one that I think is really going to get people stirred up is that in the draft version of this rule, and it's just a draft version, this is the first step of the process, but this is what they're proposing, is to entirely eliminate the use of education freedom funds for team sports. So team dues, equipment, uniforms, anything related to team sports under this proposed rule would be explicitly banned. Now, that is clearly, in my view, anti-education freedom. It's not family friendly to these families, and I also think it exceeds the statutory and legislative authority of what the department has been given. There also the other kind of bigger concern here that I think is just, again, you could say, oh well, maybe it's reasonable, maybe it's not, but do they have the authority to do this? And is this even? The more regulations you put on this, the more difficult you make for families to use the program, which is the opposite of what we should be doing and thinking. And so the second big piece they're doing is they're saying, well, you can still use the funds for educational field trips, which has always been the case. We're in year 3 of this program. You've always been able to do that. But now they're saying you can only go on field trips within the state of Arkansas. So they're drawing a line around the state of Arkansas and saying, you can't go anywhere outside of the state of Arkansas. Maybe there's some reasonable justification for that I'm unaware of, but it just seems silly. And like if you're a parent or a family that lives in Fort Smith or Northwest Arkansas or West Memphis or some bordering Texarkana, and you want to go on a field trip across the state line, you got to stop and think about that now because state government is all of a sudden watching you and regulating you. I mean, it's not education freedom at some point if we continue to over-regulate this program to death.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the kids from around this area go to like Space Camp, which is in Alabama. I believe that's a school trip that I've heard of.
Yeah,
I've also heard of some high school field trips that were going down to like the World War II Museum in New Orleans. So I mean, these are important things to go and see and to lock into your into your memory from history. And so yeah, that's disappointing to see that. So Nick, just to get this square on the way out here. The rules and what's written down right now, these aren't necessarily going into effect immediately. Is there public comment and some negotiating that's going to go on before this all goes into effect?
There is a process that will play out here, so there's a little bit of time for folks to speak up and raise their concerns, whether that's to their legislators or the State Department of Education or the state school board. As of now, I believe this is on the agenda to be heard by the State Board of Education tomorrow. So they will consider the rule, and if they approve the rule, at that point it will go out for public comment. And so anyone, and we'll try to, I tell you what, if it gets to that point, Toby, we'll try to put it on our social media accounts and put it on our website, and they probably even send an email so folks know where they can submit a comment. It doesn't have to be something formal.
Right.
It can be a sentence or two to say, I don't like this, or this is not going to be good for my family. But we'll try to promote that and make that available to folks and accessible. That'll be for 30 days. Mm-hmm. And then what happens at that point is it comes back to the state board. The state board will review all those comments and sift through them and figure out if they want to make some changes to push back to the department. And then really the final step, the final stopgap, I believe, is going back to the legislature through the Legislative Review Committee, and then they'll have a chance to push back or approve it. So there is still some time here, and some of this is going to filter through. But what's amazing to me and really just frustrating is this was dropped on a Thursday. I've not talked to a single legislator yet that knew about it, and it's being attempted to be pushed through the state board tomorrow. As you said, I haven't seen any news reports or any coverage of this. We're trying to get the word out to make sure education freedom families know. But this is another step backwards, and we're going to continue to be vigilant because, if we over-regulate this program to death, we're going to have real problems with families wanting to be a part of the program, and it's just not it's not friendly or favorable to the families that actually need this. It's not education freedom.
Yeah, it'll take the freedom component out is what.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely revisit this next week, Nick, and get an update on what's happening as it moves forward. Of course, you can follow along, folks, at opportunityarkansas.org. Of course, they've got the X account, the Facebook page, the YouTube channel, so make sure you follow those to stay up to date on this. But, Nick, always appreciate the information, and, of course, we'll catch up with you again next week. But thanks for joining us this morning.
All right. Thanks, brother.